Ever wondered if real, lasting change is possible? Well, friends, you're not alone with that. It's a question Ben and I get a lot with the coaching that we do with guys, and we're going to talk about it today. Can I change?
Can you change Pete?
Fuck knows, mate.
Yeah. You know, I actually know. Do you know what? I think both of us are very good at this. Like,
Yes.
I probably what I could say, even in the time that I've known you. Just like an example of this, I remember both of us sat on a train saying how much we did our distaste for social media, and how we didn't want to be those people doing stories and showing up all the time. And we were like, can't we just have conversations and meet people for coffee? And like there was like both of us in that moment, our belief about ourselves, where we weren't these guys that showed up on socials, did all the influencing, like we'll call it influencing for
Yeah.
just kind of like a real high level look at it. And I remember you just made this decision. You were like, I'm just going to embrace this. I'm just going to do it. And it wasn't like it wasn't this like I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then you didn't do it. It was like I'm just going to do it. And then all of a sudden, there's this massive change where you went from your pictures on Facebook or Instagram being a couple of Thor, maybe some of Leo. So all of a sudden there was these 6, 10, 15 reels a day, not reels, stories a day going up. And there was just a big shift in you. You changed yourself in a very, very short space of time. And I think that is probably one of your master skills is seeing something that you really like in someone like a mentor. I know you invest heavily in mentorship and coaching. You see something in them, and you're very, very good at bringing it into your own operating procedures and changing narratives, perhaps like, oh, I'm not that guy that does that. So that's what my thoughts on this initially are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that moment. I remember having so much reluctancy to putting myself online. So now I'm the operations guy. I've always been the operations guy. I'm cool behind the scenes. Don't want to be in front of the camera. And at the time, my wife, what now ex-wife, she was kind of like she was building her own influence. So she was loving the camera and it was always, hey Pete, take a photo. Hey Pete, take a video. So there was also that for me as well. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm the same. I think I've been the same. I love talking to the camera. I hate posing. Like doing a false pose for me was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I even remembered that, like, we did a recent shoot where I just got some stock footage for my promotions, and I remember just posing and feeling really uncomfortable. And like we're going to talk about this in the podcast today. It's like that was real pain for me.
Mm.
It's like put me in front of an audience of 1,000 people. I'm like comfortable, not maybe a bit, but at the same time, but make me pose and put a smiley face on for a photo, and I'm like, this is really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, so last weekend I just hosted an event in London and had 40 plus guys come, and it was an amazing event, 2 days. And one of the guys said to me before the event started, bumped into him, he was like, "Do you not get nervous like about hosting this sort of thing?" And my response was, I feel the whirring in my stomach, but I don't label it as being nervous. I actually label it as it's the fucking energy that I'm building right now. And I'm going to cultivate and I'm going to bring that into the room. And like, I'm like, dude, you'll see it later. And I was like, you'll see it, you'll fucking feel it. But there was absolutely a time where that was not the case for me. I remember in my early 20s, when I actually wanted to be a pitch designer. So I wanted to stand essentially in front of groups of people, corporates, and pitch designs to them, which was a high paying job. It was a job with a lot of status, like to be the pitch designer, to be the guy that's winning projects for your company. You get a lot of status
Right.
on that. I wanted to be that guy. But I'd fucking shit myself. Even thinking about standing in front of people and essentially pitching to win a project. But for a good year, 18 months, I just consistently put myself into those scenarios, even though I was fucking shitting myself. consistently put myself into the rooms. I remember like going to these pitches and I'd have music playing in my ears around like it'd be like motivational talks, right? And I'd be highly caffeinated. I'd be doing anything to like just make sure that Paul's tactics to get me through the door. And so many times, so many like I fucked pitches up and like I'd lost my words and was standing in front of 10, 20 people like fucking horrendous. But over time I got really good at it. And now like you can talk in front of thousands of people. I can host a room so comfortable. But there was a huge period of being incredibly discomfortable, uncomfortable. But on the other end of that is change.
Yeah, I think like, the great question for the podcast today is like, can I change myself? And I remember there's been like so many times in my 20s where I let people down. I was so disorganized, and I've had that question in my head. I'm like, am I going to be living a life of this? Like, is this my life where I'm just have to face these kind of frustrations with myself all the time? Like, chaotic finances, chaotic relationships, chaotic, and knowing that it was all my own doing, like knowing that I was the root cause of all of it. And I remember thinking, and anyway, it was a moment. I remember thinking I was sat drinking coffee, and I stood up a client. She was a high paying client. I rocked into the gym late by about 2 minutes, and she said, "Where were you?" And she just literally didn't sign up because I was 2 minutes late. And she said, "Ben, I don't have time for people like you in my life." And I was like, "What?" And it stung like crazy, but it worked. It helped me enormously. Anyway, I closed the gym up for the day. I was really butthurt, and then I sat in the coffee shop and sulked. And I remember thinking to myself, like, am I just like doomed to this life of being disorganized, not doing the things that I said I would do, being like character traits of so, and this is that I think, can I change myself? Looking at where did all these come from, like not only just from my mum, from my dad, but like my own doing. I was like, am I just doomed to live a life of these shadow behaviors from my parents and my upbringing? And then it wasn't until I actually started working with a really transformational coach that I really started to see massive change. So yeah, I just want to share, like, doing the podcast today, having been in that place, having asked that question, I think it's a really, really important question for you to ask and answer.
I think that's step one, is explore the doubt, exploring where you're doubting yourself. And like Ben just said there, like, am I taking on the traits of my parents? Like where is this doubt coming from? Like, have I got like this fucking horrendous fear of failure or horrendous fear of like people judging me? Like I had the fear and it fucking came fucking true as well. Like standing in front of people, not knowing what to say in a pitch. Like it came fucking true. I didn't die. I just did it again and I got better at it. Did it again, got better at it. And those people, by the way, those people that I stood in front of, fucking remember it. I fucking remember it so well. My MD was there, and I remember, and I really tried to ramp up the conversation as well because I knew I was fucking up, and it was like a fucking lead balloon. It was like a lead balloon. Oh, no one responded to my bid of me trying to ramp up. The room was fucking silent, and I remember I was fucking so red. But I just did it again. I did it again. And those 10 people that were in that room, I bet they don't remember me now. Right? I can't remember their face. I can't remember who they are. I don't remember the fucking name of the company. Just remember it happening. That was years ago.
Yeah, the best, like I always like that whenever I'm going to try and do something. So say, for example, you've clicked on this podcast today, you're listening in or watching, and this is a big question for you. Can I change myself? I always think, like, where can I go to explore this? And I loved Steve Chandler's work on this. Like Steve Chandler, so let me just kind of give you a background on Steve. Steve is one of the best coaches in the world, one of the most highly acclaimed coaches, worked with some of the biggest names in business. And he worked with Brian Johnson from Heroic, and he's like such a clout in the coaching industry. And there was one specific book, and it's not even the book itself, it's the freaking title that says everything. It's the story of you and how to write a better one. And in the book, he talks about these ideas of we live inside stories, and we just have a story. We've at some point we've made a story about ourselves that we've made permanent. We have this idea of something called, and this might be something you want to write down. And it's a word, so it's like 2 words that have really helped me understand and answer this question: is idea of personal permanence. So personal permanence is this belief that we are somehow fixed in time and space and we'll never change. So when we recall a friend from university or college or school, when we think about, hey, I knew Pete back in, oh yeah, he was this guy and he had these traits. The way that your mind works is you don't imagine Pete as he is now. You imagine Pete as he is or was 15, 20 years ago. It's because you have this idea that Pete is fixed. Pete was this, there's this identity that is fixed and is the same. And anyway, I was like, yeah, that's so crazy. This idea, we have this idea that we have this personal permanence. And I was like, and it was really interesting. There was a guy in my school year who was an absolute failure. Like the guy was just like a layabout, never did anything in his life. He was, I used to think he was thick. I was like, this guy is like, intelligence is somewhat poor. Anyway, I was walking through Llandudno town, which is real small town vibe. And I bumped into him. I was like, hey man. And he's like, he turned around. He'd had his teeth done. His face looked good. He had a suntan. His clothes looked on point, and my brain was going wild. I was like, this guy is different. He's like, right. And I was like, dude, can I just say you look incredible? And he goes, oh man, back in school, you knew me when I was back in school. Like, I've got my own company, I've got doing this. And I was like, oh wow. And like in that moment is one of those moments where I was like, change is possible. He was categorically not the same guy that I knew in school. He was a successful guy, vibrant, and it's this idea that when we believe change is possible for ourselves, we believe it to be possible for others as well. And that's why it's so important as a coach, as a consultant, even a therapist, you've got to believe that you can change because you've got to believe other people can change. Yeah. So that was my experience of it. And the words that I think that we hang on to is this idea of personal permanence. I am the same person no matter what.
Yeah. And I like that. I've never heard of that before. And I'm going to relate that to, and what you talked about there, like you are the story that you tell, but you're also your habits. It's like that story that you tell coincides with your habits. And then you are essentially your habits, the way you wake up in the morning, the way you go straight to the toilet, the way you think when you wake up in the morning, when you go into the toilet, what you're thinking, whether you're thinking gratitude and I'm so blessed to be in this place, or whether you're thinking, fucking hell, I've got that email to send, I've got that to do, I can already hear the kids getting up, right? And then whatever you do after that, and after that, and then after that, and after that, it's highly, highly likely it was the same thing that you did yesterday, and the same thing that you did the week before, and then the month before that. Highly, highly likely. Like it's not as though like you wake up this morning, Ben, and we're like, do you know what? Today, complete new fucking identity. Just gonna take that mask over there, take this one off, put this one on. New, done. New habits, new fucking everything. Highly, highly unlikely. Like we are our habits. We are the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, there is actually something I've really had a revelation around. I've done a lot of work with Benjamin Hardy over the last say 6 to 12 months. I told you to read his book, Pete. One of those books, isn't it? It's like
fucking good book.
It's such a good book. He's like one of his many books. But I one of the things I do really, really well when I get an author, I read all of their work and I'll read it multiple times, and I'm still rereading his books at the moment. And his concept around your past creating who you are in the moment. Most people think that they're created by their past, and it's not true. And it is actually, this is his argument against this is actually really powerful, about especially with how can I change myself, is that most people believe that the past creates the present and your present creates the future. That's their way that they think. So we think that we are a product of our past, So when we want to look at like who we are in the moment, we look at blaming our past. However, he argues that your future creates your present and your present creates your past. And let me explain this. When you think that your past creates your present, you believe that you're a product of all the things that have happened to you, all the thoughts and the habits and the behaviors, and that's who you're living and breathing right now, which is true to an extent. The results you're experiencing now are a result of the things that have happened. However, who you want to become and who you're going to be is a result of your future. And the way that he talks about this is when you have a brighter future, what happens is you start to change the way that you behave in the present. And when you behave better and you think better in the present, you also look at your past differently. So your actual past changes because of the way that you're looking at it. Now, this is like, for example, when you look at 3 wins every single day, when I've done, what are 3 things that have gone well today? And you stack them every single day, day after day after day after day after day after day, all of a sudden you start looking at your past in a different way. And that changes. So actually the past just becomes a subjective interpretation of what we're experiencing in the moment. And that's like what he talks about in terms of trauma. He talks about trauma is just an experience that hasn't been made into a win. It's such an amazing concept. So let's just kind of put this into the context of what we're talking about now is, do I believe that I can change? Yes. And not only can you change in the present, you can actually change the way that you look at your past. And I think this is so important for so many of you guys listening in, is that you probably thought divorce happened to you. Your business broke down because of you. You're the failure. All these things had negative consequences and they hurt you. Until you reframe them and saw that all happening for you, it will continue to be painful. It will continue to inhibit your change. So this is the stuff I'm getting at the moment from his work. And it's really, really helping me see not only my own life, but the lives of clients as well.
Such a great insight. That's such a powerful insight. It is. But here's an example. When I went through a divorce, the moments of like when I was in that, when it was so fresh, was so fucking painful.
Oh, man, yeah.
So it's just so painful. And I had people around me saying, dude, some stage you're going to look back at this and it's going to be one of the best things that ever happened to you. In the moment, you're like,
you can't see that.
Fucking mate, I get what you're saying, but it's hard to hear, right? But now I can, like, because my mind is in a better place, I can look back at that and go, wow, yeah, what a gift. What a gift of all the lessons that I took from that relationship. And actually, over the last like year since I've separated, I probably had more growth in that year than I had in the previous 6. Fucking hell, what a gift. So I can see how that concept works.
But equally, like, and we've talked about this before, is that one of the things that you, Catherine Woodward Thomas, is it Catherine Woodward Thomas? Yeah. So it's like you had that conversation with her, which was talking about not making personal change, so you don't bring all the shit from your previous relationship into the next one. It's like, and I think going back to the question we're talking about is like, can people change? Well, the thing is that some people actually don't. They'll have a relationship, it'll finish, they won't do any personal work, and then what they will do is they will just repeat the pattern again.
Yes.
And there was oh my gosh, this is like, actually, I had a cycle of 3-year relationships. And so I literally, honestly, it was like my high school relationship was 3 years, my university relationship was 2-3 years, and it was like 3 year relationships all the way up to the point of when I met my first wife. And I think that didn't last long, obviously, after the divorce either. So, and then I remember speaking to my therapist, Tim, and I was like, yeah. And I noticed there was a pattern that 3 years, but guess where that pattern came from? My mum.
Your mum.
Mum had 3-year relationships. And then there was so many 3-year relationships that they were almost like exactly 3 years. And not blaming my mum, but I'm just saying that we become the patterns that we get from our parents. And I think change, like, can we change? Is that a decision that I'm not going to perpetuate those patterns?
Yes. Yeah. And it's a decision to not only acknowledge that, but to then go, right, like I did with my previous relationship, was like, okay, I'm coming out of a relationship now. How can I just go into uncovering like where I was at fault during that relationship, where I let things slip, like how I can improve going forward, rather than just jumping straight into the next. But it's the same with anything. It's the same, like say you have a business fuck up, a business breakdown, you're going to start a new business. It's actually being aware of like why the original business broke down. Same with your finances. Say your finances have been in a pickle for a long time. It's like, right, let me have a look at this. Where am I fucking up? What's my habits? What's my behaviors that I've consistently repeated over time? And just getting aware of all of those things.
Yeah, there's something that I actually like. Yeah, like, can I change? But how do I change? I think that's what is the nebulous, confusing struggle that a lot of people have. Is like, well, actually, this is the way I've always been. How do I change? And the first, most obvious thing is time and attention. It's like time and attention. It's giving something time in your calendar and intense bouts of attention is the first tool to change anything. And it seems overly simple, but if you think about this, right, you've got this character trait that you're lazy. Like, this is what you believe about yourself. I'm lazy. I'm a lazy person. I don't like training or pushing myself hard, and I want to change. I want to change, but I've never been the person that goes to the gym. Well, the only way that you're actually going to change that is time in the gym and attention. Like, bring your attention to the gym for a period of time. And it's amazing what happens when you see people that although they might have this story that I'm not this person that goes to the gym, I'm not a saver, I'm not someone who goes into long distance relationships. If they can just suspend that story, like just park it, like it might be true, but we're going to carry on doing things anyway, and just give something time and attention, it's amazing what you can do. Like, and this is where I'm actually on a bit of a challenge at the moment with ADHD. There's so many people pathologizing themselves with ADHD, and they're like, I'm just, I can't change. I'm a sort of person who can't focus. I can't bring my attention on something. I'm like, I am definitely in the category of people with terrible attention spans. Yeah, I can spend long stretches of time focused on something. And here's why: I never bought into the story that I had ADHD or ADD. Never even got diagnosed, never got statemented. And then I just spent time doing the things that actually improves my attention span. Reading books, listening to audio books, going on long walks, focusing on one thing, meditation. And I think that so many people do that now, is that they pathologize themselves with something, and then they say, well, this is the reason I can't change. I can't possibly change, Pete, because I've got ADHD, so I can't focus on this.
Yeah, it's a label. Yeah, it's like, and sometimes it is as simply as it's like it's reframing the label. Saw my mum a couple of weeks ago. I could see she's fucking so stressed. I could just see it in the way she looks, the way she's acting. She's so stressed. And I had a really long, deep conversation with her. And I was like, she's just putting everyone else before her. Everyone. And I was like, you have to start putting yourself first. Just do something for yourself, whether that's some Pilates or yoga every week, just something for you to take yourself out of everyone else's equation. And anyway, right, she agreed to do. And I messaged her yesterday. I said, hey, how's the Pilates going? She goes, oh, well, I was supposed to have my first session on Saturday. But Saturday is her husband, my stepdad, is his 70th birthday. In the evening, they're having a party. She goes, but it's way too stressful for me to do the Pilates on the Saturday. So I'm going to have to wait until another Saturday. And I said, Mum, you just labeled that stressful. Like, why not just reframe that label from, hey, this is really stressful, to this is my time to ground myself and relax before I've got a big day ahead of me with the party. Right? And it's like, just catch yourself where you're like Ben just said there, I'm like labeling myself with a condition, or I'm labeling a scenario with, this is stressful, this is overwhelming, I've got so much going on right now. Try a reframe, because again, it goes back to the story you tell.
I think the kind of the sentence is like, I am someone who.
Yes.
I am someone who can't focus. I am someone who can't. I'm someone who can't eat just a salad. I'm someone who can't. Like, you know, if you were to finish that sentence out loud, I am someone who can't. And that's the like an identity you've created for yourself. And that's the great thing, is that when you actually realize it's very plastic, it's very changeable, it's actually very, very, what's the word for it, pliable. It means you feel it's actually really empowering as well. I think that I was someone who saw myself as really disorganized.
Right.
A default state for me was not to use my calendar, not to have appointments, and that's what I called freedom. I thought freedom was having no appointments, and it was chaos. It was really chaos. And then I worked enormously on that. And the only thing is, in the last 2 or 3 years, where I've thought, hang on a second, yeah, I'm actually quite organized. I would never say I'm on the upper echelons of diligence with my calendar. You know, so obviously it's always going to be someone better. But I remember thinking, I was like, hang on a second, no, this is actually, I'm really good compared to where I was. And that was something that was a big shift for me. It's like, oh, I can call myself organized now.
Yeah. Another reason why change can be hard is that it's highly likely, and you know, I do this, Ben does this. We'll have things in our subconscious that just we're not fucking aware of that we're doing. So, an example of this last week, one of the guys in the Awakened Man, we're having a bit of a competition right now on sending out offers, proposals, see who can make the most money. Essentially, it's just a game, right? It's a really fun game. One of the guys who is incredibly intellectual, has a super great business, should probably be doing the best out of everyone, has, I think, made like one offer, right? One of the other guys who's new to the game has made like 67 offers, right? And this week I ironically sold to everyone, literally with a WhatsApp and a Stripe link. That was it. And this guy messaged me. His name's Al. I hope you're listening. And he was like, your funnel was literally a WhatsApp and a Stripe link. And I'm like, yeah, don't fucking complicate things. And then what came out was that, because Al is highly intellectual and he's an accountant. And so for most of his life, he's actually had to make things quite complicated, because accounting can be very complicated. And the way that he was taught when he was going through college and university and graduate degrees and so on to become a chartered accountant, there's a lot of complexities that he has to go through. And so subconsciously, it's like he has to make everything mega complicated. Every proposal has to be extremely detailed and has to really put a lot of thought into it. Overcomplicating everything, was not able to see it. Just didn't even realize he was making things complicated. And because of that complication, actually stopping him from going out and making loads of offers. All right. Whereas we saw that, like, hey, dude, you're just complicating the shit out of everything. Make this super simple. Just give people offers.
Yeah.
But without seeing that, you see, it was just well within his subconscious. He just wouldn't have seen that.
Yeah. I think I did a training a while ago on the many masks of fear. Like, why don't we change his fear? Like, fear of, like, he's obviously got a fear there that unless it's complicated, all the I's are crossed and the T's dotted.
Yes.
You cross the T's, dot the I's. But if he hadn't done that, there's something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen. And I think the complicated mask that we wear when it comes to fear is that I'm going to make this so complicated, it justifies my ability to not take action and not change. And yeah.
Procrastination.
Yeah, it's you feel justified in not maybe moving forwards because things are so complicated.
Yeah. So if we were to map out some paths to change, what do you think that would be?
I think first of all, isolate is going to be the first one. Is isolate what it specifically you want to change, because I think trying to change too many things at the same time is difficult. So say, for example, you're disorganized, you're late, you don't keep your promises. You know, it all falls under the banner of integrity. But it's like, if you were to isolate one thing in your life and say, right, I'm going to change this thing, I think that's the first place to start. Like, whether it's self-sabotage, whether it's lateness, whether it's paying people on time, whether it's money management, my belief is that putting lots of time and attention into one thing and almost working on that thing so you see it making significant progress is a good place to start. I believe that, especially in self-development, too many people try to change too many things at the same time, and they haven't got enough time and attention to place on these different things. So I believe the first place to start is isolate one thing you want to go to freaking war on. You're going to go absolutely all out. You're gonna laser it, like, laser it out, because when you start to try and change too many things, you just haven't got that ability to spread that across so many.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. It's essentially you are bringing awareness. You're cultivating your own self-awareness here. It's like, all right, well, where in my life that keeps fucking coming up that I'm not where I want to be. Yeah, in relationships, in health, and fitness, in business, whatever that looks like. It's getting real self-aware on those areas, and actually, like journaling, like writing this down is mega powerful. Like, we can think and think and think in our heads. When we start getting things down on paper, it's like, why do I do this? Where does this come from? Who have I learned this from? Like, what is this doing for me by me doing this behavior? Like, why do I like this behavior? Because sometimes, like, this is a good one. It's like, why do I like this behavior? It's, why do I like eating lots of food? Why do I like not going to the gym? Whatever that looks like. It's like, find the reasons that it's like keeping you safe and keeping you comfortable. It's really fucking enlightening to know that and to figure that out. So self-awareness, bring awareness to it all.
Yeah. I think the next piece is, like, get very clear on what changes that part of you. So I think so many people try and solve the wrong things with the wrong activity. So, for example, most people think that doing a body transformation will change their self-love. And this is something that I think is really important, is that just getting thinner, it might facilitate some of the things that might make you love yourself more, but they are very different things. Like, get very clear on what needs to be done. Like, the practice of learning to love yourself is mainly psychological, albeit it can be, you're done with going to the gym and starting to look in the mirror and saying nicer things to yourself, but be very clear on what it is that's going to make the changes that you want. Because sometimes I think that we just end up doing the wrong thing in it for such a long time. So you can have a very targeted approach. For example, one of the things that I think Awaken Man is very, very good at is allowing men to speak openly in front of other men and get courageous, improve their integrity. And so if you're a man who hasn't been making and keeping promises to people, getting a group of men and making commitments in front of them about what you're about to achieve that is actually the medicine. Like, that's the right thing. Whereas if you're trying to improve your integrity by, I don't know, just trying to be on time more often, it's probably not a big enough shift. It's not a big enough commitment.
Yes. Yeah. We actually had that over the weekend, and that was one of the guys' things. And one of and this is actually what Ben said to in the previous point, was to keep this simple. It's like one thing. Just like, what's the one thing that you can do that in doing so will make everything else easier or simpler? And this was what, like, one of the guys, he was like, this is what I'm going to do for the next 90 days. And there was like 4 things in there. I'm like, dude, you're fucking overcomplicating this. Your thing is that you can't keep to your schedule. You're late. You're just late to things, and you put way too many things. You allow people to go into your schedule. Why don't you just stick to your schedule for the next 90 days, and that's it? Right? Report back to the group every day. Done it. Just stick to that bit. And again, this is habit forming. You're essentially, when you're doing these things, is that you are installing a new pattern, a new habit that you can repeat over and over. And like we said earlier, your habits and your stories, they produce the result of where you are now.
Yeah, I think the next one for me would be watch for upper limit behaviors. So I was actually on a client call before this, and like he's like, dude, yeah, I've been doing really well. I'm sticking to my structure. I've been following my calendar, and he was on holiday. He was actually in a different country, and I was like, well, what have you got in your calendar for the next 2 weeks? He's like, oh no, I'm all over the place the next 2 weeks, so I can't put anything in my calendar. I'm like, bullshit. I was like, this is precisely when you most need to stick to your calendar. And I think what happens is we get a little bit of momentum with something, and we cannibalize the results by thinking we're out of the woods.
Yeah.
And I think this is, for a lot of guys, this is what happens. So this is, for example, alcohol. You think you've done like maybe a month off the booze. You're like, yeah, I feel great. Do you know what? Oh, I'm just going to go out for one. I'm just going to go out for one. And that one turns into 55. You know, it's just like, you're not out of the woods. You're like, dude, like, get out of the woods. And this is something I think that why so many people relapse is that they think they get a bit cocky about the power that previous self, that previous person, that previous habit had over them. So I think what you've got to do is you've got to be very, very mindful. If you're making change, you've got to totally cut off oxygen to the previous self, like the previous version of yourself.
Yeah. And also acknowledge that change is hard. Like it is. We've all been there. Like, fucking not drink on the head. Do you know what? I'll have one. That bit there is the hard. That in that moment where you have to be disciplined, knocked it on the head for 33 days. Well, it's all right to have one. It's in that moment where you need your discipline. That's where it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Same like cigarettes. I've knocked it on the head for 60 days. You know, it's all right just to have one little cheeky one on them out with the guys. That is the hard. Not porn on the head. Yeah, this is a really difficult one for a lot of guys. Yeah, I've been through this, but I'm still going through this. It's like, I've not watched porn now for a year. It won't hurt. It won't hurt. That in that moment, that is your fucking test, my friend. That is the hard.
So I went through a relapse with it with hotel rooms.
Yeah, it's environments.
I just made this little rule. And I was like, oh yeah, well when I'm away and in a hotel room by myself, that's when it's allowed. And then
dude, that is not just your rule.
Isn't it? All right.
Mate.
That's why so many guys laughed when I said it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the guys on the weekend, and I know a bunch of them stayed in hotels, and we were like, seeing each other off at like 10:30 at night. And he's like, fucking get back to the hotel, have a little just me and the right hand.
Yeah.
And then it was this like long joke for about 10 minutes about how like his iPad screen is going to burst open because there's going to be so much of it going. It's just
I think I just say what a lot of guys do.
Yeah.
I think but coming back to the point, I think this is actually so important. We've got to remember the grasp that our old behaviors have on us. And we're so, if you think that you can do the habit or the thing and get away with it not having a crippling effect on you for days afterwards, you're lying to yourself. I think I think, do you know what, the film that demonstrates this the best is Frank the Tank in Old School.
Good.
And he's just like at this moment. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, I'm not even going to explain the film because you've got to look at yourself in the mirror and just think about your consumption.
Yeah.
So there's a moment where Frank drinks from the beer bong and he's like, oh, as soon as it touches your lips, and it's
before he's drinking, he was like, no, stop drinking. I'm not drinking. He said no, and he was persuaded into it by the young lad.
Yeah, and I think that's what you see in that is you see this guy that's like kind of, you know, enjoying a mild life. He's not connected with anyone anymore. As soon as he had some alcohol, whoosh, he's streaking around the neighborhood. And I think that kind of is some guys actually have a real issue with that. They do actually revert straight back into old habits very, very quickly. And that's why you need a group of guys around you. You need a group of guys to keep that standard, saying like, you know, you don't do this.
But I'd also say this, right? If you have a setback in your change, acknowledge it, give yourself a bit of self-compassion, go fucking it, I've had this habit for a long time, right? I've fallen off the wagon. fair enough. Then jump back on. Don't. The worst thing you can do is, oh fuck it, I fucked it now. Might as
Yeah.
well just go back to normal.
Yeah, I think that this is something I talk about a lot with regards to change, is that what the win is how fast you get back on the horse, like
Yes.
how fast you recalibrate, and then the distance you can go. So, like, say for example, you self-sabotage on a frequent basis, so then you go 6 months, then you go a year, then you go 2 years. Like, that's all wins. It's not that you are a flawed, imperfect human, but, and I think you've seen talked a lot about this with regards to drugs and alcohol. There is actually a zero tolerance policy. It's like that.
Yes.
That's something you just can't return to. It's like it's like, and it's the same with womanizing. It's the same with anything. It's like that they've got to be hard nosed. Like, this is like, say one of the things that you want to change about yourself is that you're unfaithful to your partner. You can't go from. It's like you can't go. You can't just dabble in that. You can't have a
What?
partner. I'm a recovering what's called womanizer.
Cheat.
Cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the word for it? There's a word for it. Lothario, whatever you want to call it. And you can't go from like, that's just got to be a hard no. This is a change that's happening. I'm never going back. I'm just changing. I'm changing who I am. And I think that's Alex. There's a guy called Alexander de Botton talks about this in the School of Life, and he talks about this idea of marriage and why marriage is like a sacred practice. Is that the reason that we sometimes stand in front of a group of our nearest and dearest and say these vows to this other person is we are all flawed when it comes to matters of the flesh. There's such a drive for, especially men, to cheat on their partners and look at elsewhere. So what we did is a social practice where we make it even more shameful and hard to break a bond. So that's like one of the reasons that marriage is, made as it is in his philosophy. And I was like, oh, that's such an interesting thing. Is like, I stand in front of a group of my closest friends and family, and so does she, and we say that we're going to be faithful to each other forevermore. And what that does is it enhances the bond and makes it less likely that we're going to go and cheat.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a really interesting argument for marriage, and that's part of the change. So like, go and think, like, what can you do to make sure that you change and you change forever? Is you make the pain of going back so big that it's just not an option. And that's where I think that you can really do yourself a lot of favors, is like, this is where you invest heavily in coaching or an event or something that you put so much into the thing that you're trying to change into. Going back is just a terrible investment of time, energy, and money.
Yes. Yeah. You force it. So it's like, I can't go back. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like with me now, I've got, like, the lifestyle I live, like, I have to earn a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no fucking way I'm going back. And because of that, it's like I'm forced to consistently improve and carry out consistent habits of change to rise up.
I think that's actually called a forcing function. I think it's actually the actual term for it is have a forcing function.
Yeah, and it also part of that, and this is going back to what you were talking about earlier with Benjamin Hardy about having a brighter future. Like, I have a really clear vision. I have a big vision, and I'm always fucking thinking about it. I read it like 2 hours ago. Like, I'm always looking at the vision. I'm always looking at, oh, that's my future. That's my future. That's my future. Like, how am I being that person now?
Yeah, there's actually Tim Ferriss talked about it in the 4 Hour Body, and he calls it a Harajuku moment. It's like when the pain of staying the same outstrips the pain of change. That's when you'll change. So
Yeah.
he calls it a Harajuku moment. So let me say that again, because it's also known as the fuck it moment. It's where the pain of staying the same outstrips the pain of change. That's when you'll change.
I've got this quote here, which I screenshotted earlier, is on my buddy's Instagram. It says, "Getting things done doesn't motivate me. It's what I'd become if I didn't get these things done that motivates me."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Fucking strong, right? It's like consistently going into the bad habits, doing the things that don't break your barriers consistently over and over again. It's like habits are that fucking scares the shit out of you of who you will not become if you don't break them.
Yeah, I think well, there's a you know, I think a lot of the Waking Man stuff, what I base my coaching around is what one can be, one must be. I think that, you know, the Maslow quote of knowing that like every man has this deep inner knowing of who he's capable of being. We all have that. And that is the biggest pain, like not achieving what we're capable of achieving. And that has always stuck with me. Like I just want to see how far I can go. Because I enjoy the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up. Anything you want to add to this, Ben?
No, I think you know, I think endorsing coaching, you know, like for if you want to look at a modality to help you with change, get a coach. It's like it's a cheat code, it's a shortcut. Get in touch with the Waking Man, get in touch with us.
Yeah.
Like it's such an easy way to speed up the certainty that you'll achieve the goal. And I think that the faster you achieve something, the more certain it feels, the more likely you are to actually achieve it. So I think just be really mindful that this is what coaching is essentially, is like helping you answer that question, can I change, and then actually making it happen.
Yeah, good roundup. You can fucking change, but especially if you've got the right people around you. Fast tracks it. Team, good to see ya. Ben, good to see ya. Until next episode, we'll catch you then.
Team, before you go, if you're not following us already, can you give us a follow on Instagram? The handle is @HeroicManOfficial. Two things on there. Number one, the link in our bio has all the information on our next meetups, next events, and there's a number of trainings in it too. The second thing is, if you give us a follow, then shoot us a message. We will send you a free training on the 4 core archetypes that every man must master to succeed in this modern Western world. That's it from me. I'll see you on the next episode after you've given us a follow. Cheers, men. See you then.